if you're wondering what happened after that backlash, well, I covered such naughty things, like complaining about graphics and stuff. But I'm so glad to be back on YouTube. And hey, a recent slew of racing games got released, so why not review some stock car games? Stock car racing, at least in the US, is a rather conservative sport. No, I'm not saying it because it's mostly run on ovals, it's because it's very well enjoyed mostly by conservatives. If I keep getting political, this will get as hated as my previous reviews, so let's stop that. NASCAR had its origins in the deep south during the Prohibition era. Back then, moonshiners souped up their cows so that they can outrun the cows much easier. And then that era ended, and now these people decided to race against each other as their pastime. As it became popular in the south, despite it being illegal, in 1948, a guy named Bill France Sr., along with some others, founded the National Association Stock Car Auto Racing, or NASCAR for short. And it wasn't until 11 years later that the first Daytona 500 was run. Before that, the Daytona event wasn't even the first in the calendar, and it ran on a public road and beach. Rallycross, the early days. Speaking of which, the cars they raced, in the main division at least, were actually stock. The only modifications are the roll cage, decals and vinyls, and that's a lot, none of that fancy mechanical stuff. There was a time that NASCAR enforced some homologation rules, so automakers like Ford and Chrysler made cars that are suitable for these types of races, while also being useful as a daily driver, probably, like the Ford Torino Talladega and the infamous Dodge Charger Daytona respectively. It wasn't until the 80s that NASCAR started giving up on literally stock cars gradually, making them powerful racing purpose machines that look almost the same if you take away the decals. It was still a mostly Southern-dominated sport, despite some races run in Northern US and even Canada, until that California babyface Jeff Gordon came in and became the youngest Winston Cup winner in 1995, which gave it a bump in popularity around the world, alongside having exhibition races in Japan and Australia. And that's how NASCAR became what it is today. Yeah, sure, they're mostly run on ovals, but don't let the tracks fool you. This is an intense sport where so many cars on the road race, and the tracks are banked, so one mistake can cause you to lose a lot of positions that you can possibly recover, retire, or worse, death. The sport is very famous for crashes and pileups. You'll never know what's gonna happen there. Don't forget about commercialism and patriotism. For some reason, ever since the chase was introduced, NASCAR seemed to have a bit of a decline, and since 2017 they seem to have this whole thing about rounds, where races divided in rounds and it stops resets the race after a round. Like, I don't know, why can't they just stick to good old-fashioned racing? So yeah, in case you somehow forgot, I'm gonna review NASCAR games. What am I doing with my life? There are a lot of games about stock car racing ever since the 80s, either having the NASCAR license or not. You have the usual ones like Nascar Racing, Daytona USA, Cars. Look, I was a big fan of the movie and loved the game as a kid. Are we happy now? But I much rather focus on the more obscure for my first game, so here's Mindscape Stages of Thunder for DOS. This is of course based off the movie starring Tom Cruise. This guy never ages! For some reason I can't choose the graphics mode but not the sound card before the title screen comes in, so I have to force myself to hear this PC speaker mess. There's no way to change the audio. I tried every button except the numbered ones and they don't do jack. I see Roland and AdLib files but there isn't a setup program, so I'm screwed. No, screw this, I can't deal with this. Let's play the Amiga version instead. Jeez, I can't see the options well. And holy crap, 4 digit laps! Alright, let's go through the trials. So the game only has 8 license tracks. I don't know if I should feel upset, but hey, look! Primitive 3D graphics in an Amiga! Dang, I can't downshift. What? I have to press down and the fire button? This feels like I'm driving in cruise control. Releasing the stick won't reduce the speed, like, at all. It stays in that speed until you hit a wall. Come on, the DOS version is more realistic than that, and the Daytona in that version looks more accurate than whatever that's supposed to be. Daytona? More like, Darlington. Nailed it. So after qualifying, you get the parade, and don't even think about switching to manual control when you're not in the cockpit view. I don't know which button to switch cameras here. It's pretty much your box standard racing game. finish the race, get to the next event and all that. The controls are just weird for me. Like I said, it kind of feels like I'm playing in a flight simulator when it comes to throttle. And considering that the standard Amiga controller only has like one button and a joystick, it feels awkward. I was expecting the button to be the gas button, but it's actually up! Crap! They mapped the controls to the arrow keys! Heaven save me! The sense of speed is just laughable. It feels like you're driving a city car around a really short track, like a dirt oval or something. Atlanta feels like Bristol, 1.5 miles my butt. So after being passed and crashed some times, I finished second? Yeah, try figuring that out, man. I'll upload the full race after this. Note to self, don't forget that. As for presentation, I know this was made in 1990 and these were considered cutting edge at the time, but jeez, the car models look like those late model cars. Or those modified ones, whichever you prefer. And the frame rate is just abysmal, even for 3D Amiga game standards. It makes the controls worse than it already is, given the fact that you can't change gears by doing the combination fast. You have to be a bit more patient. The 2D work won't make up for all this. Also, there's no HUD when you race. I don't know why they didn't add it when they did so to the qualifying laps, so I have to keep track of what lap I'm in by myself. I already lost count. The DOS version has the HUD even when you race, so what's the excuse here? The audio is alright. Yeah, digitized and all that, although it sounds like they record the car sounds while our electric rail was on or something. Days of Thunder is a mess. I rather much play hard driving on the Mega Drive than this. But let's get to the real meat of the video though. The license was at one point given to EA, Hasbro, /Infogrames, Atari, and Sierra. It's like NBA with EA and Take-Two, but actually more complex. While the latter are both trying to emulate realism of the sports, the former is more varied. You had Sierra with Papyrus making really spot-on simulations of the sport, Infogrames doing good simcades of it, and EA seems to be flip-flopping on every iteration only to stop at NASCAR 09. Let's review NASCAR Heat for the PS1 first. Released in 2000, it was made by Monster Games and ported to PS1 by DICE. Yes, that DICE. Yeah, they were synonymous with racing games before being bought by EA. Rally Sport Challenge, anyone?
Hi, I'm Alan Bestwick.
Oh god, actual people! So this is of course based on the 2000 Winston Cup, and unapologetically Alan really spews out the actual name instead of just saying NASCAR Racing Series, despite the fact that Winston is a cigarette brand. You have the usual championship and single race modes, but you also have the Race the Pros mode, where you try to beat the NASCAR driver's time in a circuit, and the Beat the Heat mode, which are challenges that are either timed or raced. To put it simply, it's like the licenses from Gran Turismo. You're gonna have a bit of frustration in here, especially in those draft challenges in Super Speedway set. The controls are really good. It's semi-realistic yet easy to learn. The way the car feels is just right, and despite the buttons being digital, the braking won't go 100% instantly, so there's that. I'm guessing the PC version is a bit more realistic, but this one is still almost spot on. As for camera, you only have 3 views, and that's fine by me, although you can't see the back of your car when you look behind. The AI can be a mixed bag. You can adjust the difficulty of the AI, but in the Beat the Heat challenges, they're a pain in the butt. I'm gonna mention the draft challenges, and oh boy. There's this one challenge where you have to draft this car to go in at least third, which is fine, but I don't know if it's how I play, but the car and the rest of the pack, minus the car in the back, goes far away from me, and they speed up at the end of turn 4 of Daytona 10 seconds in. Come on, man! By the way, there's this draft meter which tells you how much you're driving behind the car. It's not that intrusive. The HUD is very cluttered, which is great. You have the position which can switch into the tire and fuel status, time, the information draft bar, and the speedometer. It's not indicated by a dial, but by just numbers. Again, this is some great HUD design. Shame about the rear view mirror. Oh wait, there is none! That means I have to constantly press the L2 button to look back. Speaking of which, the graphics are good. Yeah, they're kind of a pixelated mess, draw distance is average, and the warping won't stop hunting you, but it's still pleasant to see. Yes, I know what's going on there, it's the emulator's fault. The game also has FFVs from not only Alan Bestwick, but from NASCAR drivers at the time. May he rest his soul. I am very thankful that it's not creepy CGI.
Just crossed the finish line with 2 laps to go. Good luck, and remember, keep an eye on that rear view mirror.
Oh, this is fine. I have one problem though. There is no rear view mirror! Man, these cutscenes are obviously recorded from a VHS tape. You can clearly see some distortion. The sounds are great, although you're gonna have to keep hearing that somewhat droning engine noise at high speeds when racing in super speedways. Of course there's no music during the race. Stay focused! And that was NASCAR Heat. It's a really good game. Monster Games and DICE did a really good job replicating the feel of NASCAR to the PS1. I recommend getting it. For you Americans, I don't know if it was ever sold outside of the US. Now for EA's turn. NASCAR 2001 for the PS1 was made by Black Box. Why does that name sound familiar? Despite having 2001 in the name, it's actually based on the 2000 Winston Cup. NASCAR seasons don't sound like the NFL, you idiots! So the game is kinda simpler than Heat in terms of modes. There's only a season and single race. That's it. Oh, and there's also quick race. Okay. I mean, I'm fine with just that, but after playing Heat, I'm kinda bummed out. Well, at least they make up for all this by including a driver creator and some fictional race courses. Where's the loops? Where's the waterfalls that you can go through? Where's George Woods' imaginary tracks? Well, at least you don't have to wait for the menu to load after you qualify or practice.
3, 2.
No, it's not the game's fault. None of the plugins that I tried make it look accurate to the game being played on an actual PlayStation. Unless that's how it actually looks like. If that's the case, that must have been awkward. So the game has up to 17 AI opponents, a bit more than Heat. The controls feel a bit different. For one thing, you understeer a bit more, and trying to slow down would improve the handling. I get that it's trying to be somewhat realistic, but trying to be good at the short tracks can be a pain. Here's a comparison lap in Bristol, which is my favorite oval track because of the stadium feel. Notice how I script the wall on the right. Another thing is that the car moves a bit slower in 2001 than on Heat. It's more noticeable when you drive it on the super speedways. In 2001 I got a fast time of 15.73. In Heat I got a 15.46. Sure, it may not be a realistic time, but hey, NASCAR 2001 is a bit better. Oh, who am I kidding? As for camera, you have not 2, not 3, but 6! 6 camera views, including your cockpit view. That's a good feature, although I don't use it very often. And if you've changed it by accident, you have to keep pressing the circle button to the one you're using. It's quite distracting. At least there's a rear view mirror, now I can sleep more easily. As for graphics, ignoring the glitches on the emulator, it looks top notch. The cars have some of the best attention to detail for the system. They have visible interiors, a functional cockpit view that is fully modeled, and the environments look great as well. Shame about the sound though. You're forced to listen to this really droning sound that is way worse than on Heat. It doesn't even sound like the actual engine that the cars use. Reminds me of that other black box game. I can't remember the name, although it has that subtitle. Undercover? No, not that. The music is alright. I really like the menu music, but as for racing music, you're forced to listen to that song every time you start a practice, qualifying, or racing session. Like, it's trying to randomize what song to play, but it's always gonna play Trouble Is. Ah! Thankfully, you can mute the music and just listen to the commentary and your spotter, although that also sacrificed that catchy menu music. Darn! That was NASCAR 2001. It's really bare bones compared to Heat. I mean, yeah, it's statistical quality over quantity, but maybe they should improve the driving physics. Other than that, it's a good game. Not sure if I recommend this. I can recommend the later ones though, mainly NASCAR 2005 or probably 06. Never played those games in my life though. And now it's time for the big one. NASCAR Racing 2003 season, exclusively for the PC. This is the holy grail of NASCAR games for me, and having managed to get it for cheap is unusual, yet worth it. It's made by Papyrus and published by Sierra, and it's their last game before their license was expired and given solely to EA. As the title suggests, this is based on the 2003 Winston Cup. Hey, at least they're honest. Let's look at the options. There are loads of options to configure, but I won't spend 20 minutes talking about it. There's a testing session, which is a good feature because I don't have to go to single race to practice there. Single race, season, and multiplayer. There's also a replay editor, an opponent creator, and a painter, although it's better off that you use Photoshop for this. So what makes this a really great game? Well, one thing's for sure is that the driving physics are one of the greatest I ever witnessed, and it still kinda holds up to this day. Now, if you're new to this, you're better off going to tutorials where it teaches you the basics of NASCAR racing, round down to the frame rate. They recommend you to play it at 30 FPS or over, by the way. Also, don't go into the garage, it's better off going with the default settings. Hey, they're words, not mine.
Stay out of the garage. You really shouldn't be tinkering with the car's setup until you're able to turn smooth, consistent laps with the default setups that come with the game. Why? Because until you've developed a proven driving technique, and until you've learned to anticipate how the car will react in any given situation, the best car setup in the world can be useless.
So yeah, don't expect this to be something like NASCAR Heat or Gran Turismo. This is a hardcore racing simulator. It's best that you use a controller or, better yet, a steering wheel. The controls are simple to learn, yet really hard to get used to it. Unless you activate the assist, you're gonna spin out of control. It's better off that you go easy on the track rather than going on like a madman. Me, for the sake of the review, I've been using traction and stability control because I'm that much of a coward. The way I play it is going easy on the throttle at corners, especially on short tracks. Don't tap the stick on corners, at least on the ovals, and brake lightly. Keep that in mind when you try racing with other drivers. This can get really messy. I mean, people keep bringing up Dark Souls when talking about hard games. Dirt Rally is the Dark Souls of rally games. I don't know what Richard Burns Rally is. Despite hating that term, this seems to be fitting, especially when you're racing against a full grid. Yes, this game can have up to 42 computer opponents, and I hope you have a PC fast enough to handle that much. Fortunately, you can limit the amount of cars visible in the game, so there's that. And by the way, when the race ends, it doesn't put you to the race menu for you. You have to get to the pits, hit the pause menu, and then get out of the car. The same can also be said about the pits and rolling starts, as they're not computer controlled. Seems counterintuitive, but hey, realism! Here's a side-by-side comparison of me driving around Bristol between Heat and Racing 2003. Yeah, the former two feel kind of arcadey compared to it. You're not supposed to actually go that fast in Bristol. On the left side, I get an average of 18.5 seconds. The graphics, while a bit dated, looks good. The car's textures look a bit blurry, but the tracks look great and are pleasant to look at. This game has 5 camera views, one away from NASCAR 2001, and it also has a very detailed cockpit view. The pit crew is also animated as well as the flag guy, so there's some attention to detail given to the game. The sounds are good as well. The engine noise may not sound good by today's standards, but the crashing noises are great, and while your crew chief and spotter are in low quality, they help you out with clarity. There isn't much to say about the music, it only plays after the race ends and when you quit. That's it! So what else can be said about it? Well, this game has a very dedicated modding community that makes series, tracks, and cars, keeping the game alive. There are a lot of mods for the game, like real series, real tracks closed or active, fictional tracks, car skins, and sound packs that can improve your experience. Unfortunately, while it may seem limitless, Papyrus only allowed 4 official physics for your mods: Cup, CTS, GNS, and PTA. I don't know what that stands for. And if you try to make your own, you'll get sued by the creators. Yeah, despite Papyrus being dead, the developers lived on to make iRacing based on this game's source code. They're really afraid if someone makes a better game than theirs. But despite all this, it's still a great game to mod. While the graphics and sounds are a bit dated, it's still an awesome game that I really recommend you buying it. If it weren't very expensive these days. I somehow got lucky and I bought it used at a CEX for €4. €4! I still can't believe I somehow bought an expensive game for cheap. The reason why they're so expensive these days is that the game was pulled from store shelves when EA wanted the stores after they became the sole company securing the NASCAR license. They are now a sought after game, yet it got really popular when NASCAR drivers, especially Dale Earnhardt Jr., played it probably during race weekends as an alternative way to practice. Given how realistic the game was at the time, I can really understand it. Until 2009, EA became the sole company to secure the NASCAR license, so they decided to make their own attempt at a Racing 2003 killer, with NASCAR Sim Racing. It didn't end well. After the mediocrity that was NASCAR 09, the license was expired, so they handed it back, and that's how GT5 got stock cars in it. In 2010, however, Activision got the license, so they hired new technicians to make the games. Unfortunately, they're mediocre at best, from what I heard. The license was then given to 704 Games. Wait, that's not a AAA publisher. Is this like Big Ben having the rights to make WRC games? What's with licensing racing games these days? Sometime in 2016, they decided to change the developers from WhiteKhakis to Monster Games, giving them another moment to shine at the NASCAR territory. Meanwhile, Turn 10 also got the NASCAR license and made a DLC pack of it, and then carried them over to Forza 7, and iRacing as a NASCAR section in the sports series. So NASCAR games seem to have a good future on their hands. Unless something horrible happens, in which case... frick.